Jerry Robinson is an economist and columnist featured weekly on WorldNetDaily.com. He's been quoted on Fox News, USA Today. He's written columns for Town Hall and Financial Sense. Jerry, welcome to the Savage Nation.
It's absolutely fantastic to be here. Thank you so much.
Hey, Jerry, give it to us straight. Is the United States really bankrupt?
Completely bankrupt. Not even a doubt about it. I mean, we are a bankrupt nation. When you consider the fact that we have a $16 trillion national debt, coupled with our unfunded obligations, which total about $120 trillion, we are in very bad shape. And unfortunately, the politicians in Washington have no plan to solve this issue. In fact, they continue to go in circles about chump change instead of dealing with the real problems that are facing us on the horizon. And that's why I wrote the book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, to help expose the origins of the crisis, but also to provide solutions. I mean, it's not all bad for those who are prepared.
Well, what are we spending all of our money on? How does the debt break down? What is this all about? Is it all nonsense?
The debt really is broken down in many different ways. Obviously, we have quite a bit of money tied up in our wars. I mean, we're spending $4 billion a week to prop up the military machine in Afghanistan. We're spending $4 billion every single week in interest payments on the national debt. Of course, much of our debt has to do with the social safety net programs like Social Security, Medicare, which is a $84 trillion program when you head out to 2040, and also Medicaid, food stamps. I mean, just take your pick. It's a huge menu of services that the government provides, and unfortunately, it's unsustainable. And that's what we're facing as we go out into a very uncertain future. Many people are bewildered; they're concerned. Recent statistics have shown us that most people are so woefully underprepared, Michael, to be able to handle losing a job. Currently, 40% of Americans have less than $500 in savings. Over 44% of Americans are not prepared to go 3 months without a job. So in the book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, we spend a lot of time talking about solutions. We list the 21 income streams that anyone can create both now and in retirement, because we definitely need to increase our income as U.S. citizens and to diversify that income. And then we also talk about ways to protect your investments. And you have to, because we are dealing with an out-of-control banking institution in the Federal Reserve, an out-of-control Congress that is spending like a drunken sailor. And so we have to properly protect our investments. And the way we do that, in the book, we lay out something we call P.A.C.E. And, Michael, for your listeners, it's a very simple, easy acronym for people to remember and write down. P.A.C.E. stands for P, precious metals, A, agriculture, C, commodities, and E, energy. These are 4 areas that have outperformed traditionally in the overall stock market and have provided stellar returns over the last 10 years, and we expect in the coming years that we're going to see the same thing.
How did the nation's mindset change from what used to be a nation of savers to what seems to be a nation of spenders?
Well, it was made possible by the fact that in 1971, whenever Nixon took us off the gold standard, he came on the Bonanza show, interrupted the Bonanza show on August 15th, 1971, and in essence said, we're not going to allow people to transfer their dollars into gold on the international scale. And so, in essence, we became a fiat currency at that moment, officially. Every global currency became a fiat currency. That is, a currency that's only backed up by the full faith and credit of their government. So we have been living in a very crazy paper economy that encourages consumption, and in fact, because our monetary system is debt-based, it requires more and more debt. So by very definition of our monetary system, Michael, we are a debt-ridden nation, and our system requires debt.
Okay, so how does the debt of the nation really affect each of us individually? Do we really know what's going on?
Well, it's easy to look out at the $16 trillion debt, the $120 trillion unfunded obligations, and say, well, that's big, but it really doesn't matter to me because, I have my credit card bill, I have my mortgage, and so that's my responsibility. That's the government's responsibility, that big gargantuan debt. Well, the truth of the matter is that we are borrowing money, and that's where that debt comes from, obviously. The problem is when you borrow money, you have to pay interest. And interest rates are currently extremely low. But as nations around the world and investors no longer want to continue to prop up this obviously perverse U.S. economy and, of course, the politicians who are doing all the spending, that's going to force interest rates to go higher. And as interest rates go higher, that's going to impact you, me, and every single person who's listening to this radio program right now. So what we encourage people to do in our book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, is to lock in your debts on fixed interest rates. I was just recently told that the United States government is no longer providing student loans on a fixed rate. Instead, they provide these on a variable rate. And so anyone with student loans, for example, should be running, not walking, to get their student loans locked in on a fixed rate. Because when these rates go up, they will go up fairly quickly. And we've seen this before in the past.
How big a problem is the entitlement system as compared to the overall debt of the nation? I mean, that's what's killing us. Entitlements. What does that really mean, entitled? Who says people are entitled to this?
It's a very big problem, and I think it's not just a financial problem, Michael. It's a psychological problem that we have found ourselves in. There's nothing wrong with a social safety net. There's nothing wrong with helping people who need help. But what's happened has been stated over and over again, we have turned our nation into, and everyone in it, into those who expect more and more and more. In essence, this attitude is something that we call the present is the minimum. And that's, in essence, what people expect. Whatever is currently being offered, that should be the minimum. It should only go up. The stock market should only go up. Housing prices should only go up. Benefit prices or benefit payments should only go up. So that's all unsustainable. I mean, in economics, you know that things can clearly not continue to go up forever. So I think the psychological impact is one of the most understated in this crisis. As we move into the full frontal assault that we're going to experience with this debt crisis, and it really begins to work its way through the system, the psychological impact, I believe, for a nation that has been on the top of its game for so many decades is going to be very hard to swallow. But in the book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, we really get into the idea of how to protect yourself. And that's why we talk about income diversification, using those 21 streams of income that you can create both now and in retirement, using that P.A.C.E. investment philosophy to protect yourself against a declining dollar. And we also get into the topic of foreign currencies and gold and silver, all of these things that people can use to protect themselves.
What effect does the debt ceiling have on us?
Well, the debt limit, the debt ceiling, kind of goes back all the way back to the early part of the 1900s. But in essence, it's really kind of a straw man argument. It's really just a cap that the Congress is able to impose upon the Treasury. Back in the 1910s, 1913, 1914, back in those, World War I era, we saw that the Treasury had to go to the U.S. Congress every single time it wanted to have a bond issuance, to issue bonds. Well, the politicians got tired of constantly having to bicker over this, so they instead extended a line of credit to the Treasury and said, look, don't spend more than this. And we called that a debt ceiling. Well, that debt ceiling has risen over and over and over and over throughout time, and now, of course, it's sitting at about $16.394 trillion, where, if you go back to the early part of the 1900s, it was, around 48 billion. So, I mean, you're talking about a massive increase in the amount of debt we've had. But, I mean, again, the current system that we're in, Michael, only facilitates more debt because the U.S. dollar itself, and this is hard for many people to hear or even understand because it's hard for me to understand as an economist. The fact is, if you pull out a dollar bill and you look at it, at the very top of that dollar bill it says three words, Federal Reserve note. Now, if I tell you that I have a car note, you know exactly what that means. That means I have a car loan. But when we see the words Federal Reserve note, for some reason our eyes glaze over. We don't seem to know what that means. What that means is very simple. That is a loan to the United States government from the Federal Reserve. Who sets the interest rates that the Federal Reserve gets paid back? The Federal Reserve. You talk about a scam. In essence, they loan money that they print out of thin air to the United States government, and then they get to set their own interest rate that they get paid back. So this is a vicious cycle that our founding fathers warned against from the grave now, saying do not get entangled with central banks. And we go into great length about the Federal Reserve and the problems that it poses in our book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, to the nation.
Okay. Would you modify the Federal Reserve System or get rid of it altogether?
I would eradicate the Federal Reserve. In fact, the way to solve this issue is to stick to the Constitution. In the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, it makes it very clear that the Congress is the only institution that is allowed to coin money, not print money. In fact, the Coinage Act of 1792, which was signed by then-President George Washington, actually states that if any man in the colonies actually moves to print paper money, he should be hanged. This was signed by George Washington, our president. Well, the reason was because they knew the danger of paper money, and so they said it must be coined. Well, today, in total irony, George Washington's face graces the front of the dollar bill, and he would, of course, had someone hung for actually creating that. So, the paper money system that we have today is indicative of our overall economic malaise. The only way out of this is to get rid of the leech, which is the Federal Reserve, and to move towards a sound monetary system, which was the goal from the very beginning of this nation.
This is a big topic, Jerry. Where can my audience learn more?
Well, I tell you what, we have had a really great response at our website. There we have a radio show, we have our newsletter, we have all of our articles, and of course the copy of this book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation. They can find it on Amazon or they can find it at our website. Our website is followthemoneydaily.com.
Jerry Robinson, thanks for joining us today on the Savage Nation.
It's my pleasure.
I'm Michael Savage, and I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.